I started drawing in a notebook with a Palomino Blackwing pencil, and then moved on to inks with a Kuretake brush pen. And now I am using basically Copic markers to do the colors on this little guy. I love the notebook paper. This is I guess it's pronounced Moleskine, spelled moleskin. I hate saying the word Moleskine. It sounds pretentious. But this paper, which is just the regular, I think just note paper unlined, it takes the Copic, well, really Prismacolor and Winsdor Newton markers that I'm going to use here really, really well. You can saturate it and get a really nice even tone. I do have a sheet of paper. It's just copy paper put behind it so it doesn't bleed through. It does bleed just a little bit. And here I'm using the Winsdor Newton markers, which are a little bit cheaper than the Prismacolors and definitely cheaper than the Copics. However, the Copics are refillable and these are not. Now here I'm using pretty desaturated colors. This is a pastel blue, which has a really, really nice light tone to it. And now I'm switching to a Prismacolor, and all of the markers behave on this paper pretty similarly. I'm just going over here. I think you can really tell when I'm going with the shadows. I just saturate that part a little bit more. The challenge here with this particular paper and paper that saturates like this is that whereas on a Bristol board you go over it, and every time you go over it, it gets like a shade darker. Here there's a saturation point, so you can see there where it's a little bit darker, but if I won't be able to get much darker than that. So you just have to keep that in mind, and I'll go back over it with a purple later for the shadows. I think the pinkish vanilla, I think, is the color I was using on the skin tones. This is a cool shadow, which is really great for, well, cool shadows, but also on a skin tone, you can take it and make like a stubble, like a 5 o'clock shadow around on a male figure. It looks really good. So there's a little bit of a pinkish hue, sardonyx, I think is what it is. Good. It's good for the reddish around the nose and the cheeks. So I've recently started, you can see on the character that's showing through, because you can see where the other character on my left hand has bled through. I was using pretty strong colors on that, just fooling around. And here I'm trying to be a little more desaturated, which is typically, if you've watched any of my videos on time-lapse drawings, or not time-lapse, but warm-up drawings, it's kind of how I color digitally these days. I like to do kind of a little bit desaturated. So I've started doing that in markers a bit, just playing around. I grabbed right here, I noticed when I grabbed the boot color was a little bit darker than the rest than I thought it was, and it draws your attention to the boot initially. I will go over it with another marker that will kind of cut through and make this a little bit lighter, because whatever the darkest part is where your eye is going to go. So that was a little bit of a mistake on my part. I've gotten to where I use the Lilac for shadows, and as I work my way down here, you'll be able to see it better. I didn't realize I was a little bit off the camera. I'm still working out my setup here, but there you can see Lilac does really well with that. Now this is the Winsdor Newton Lilac. The Prismacolor Lilac is a little bit darker, and you just have to experiment to see what you like. But the thing that I found that I like about using the purple color for shadows is that when it hits a yellow or any type of color that leans towards yellow, it doesn't turn green. Sometimes you'll use a blue for a shadow, and all of a sudden you have a little green hue in there because yellow and blue make green, and you don't hit that with a purple shadow. But it just depends on what you're going for and what you want to accomplish with it. This was after a whole day of drawing. I'm on a deadline and getting ready to go to a convention and trying to get as much done as I can. But I have found that just playing around in a sketchbook and doing something fun after a day of doing something deadline oriented is a bit relaxing. It's just a different function of your mind, and so it helps. Does help relax. From the outside, it just looks like I'm drawing after a day of drawing, but the two mental processes are not the same. So got to be careful putting yellow against black there so it doesn't smear in. I think I successfully got around that. But here's another Prismacolor. Don't be afraid to mix up markers. I always mix up. I tend to mix up markers quite a bit, and it usually, if I had a whole complete Copic set, I would probably stick to Copic. I just haven't quite got there yet. Eventually, I just need to replace every Prismacolor and every marker I have in another, like the Winsdor Newton and the Prismacolors, replace them with Copics and refills, because in the long run, the refills really do make the Copics cheaper, because you can refill that sucker a whole bunch of times, and you can replace the nibs and everything else. So I'm using here I was trying to use I started using a blue for shadow, and thought, I need to just stick with the purple and kind of dull down that red. What is that thing called? There's a name for that little hobo satchel thing, and I can't remember what it is, but there's a technical term, and some of you probably know what it is. At this point, I'm just wrapping up. This is the final stages. I always like to put here, the purple will dull down a bit. Some inks cut through other inks, and we'll dull it down. So I'm about to, I think, do a little outline. I found that I like doing a little cool outline. I'll do some pink on the knuckles there. Around a figure. I don't know what it does, but I just like the way it looks. And I've also gotten to the point where I like to give them something to stand on. There we go, the shadow. Just so the character isn't hovering over, nothing. Kind of grounds him a bit. And just a little, I'll take the Curry. That's the Kuretake pen that I inked him with. The Kuretake pen is really nice. All right, and there's the finished sketch. It took probably, from start to finish, probably about 20-25 minutes. The video is sped up a little bit. So thanks for watching. Check out some of my other videos. I have a few playlists there with time-lapse drawings and warm-up drawings that are digital, and a daily vlog. So subscribe, and I will see you all next time.